Guys, we have great privilege hearing from Debi. Yes, Debi is going to be sharing with us on holiness, the series of holiness. And this is the last week that we're going to be talking about this. Not the last week ever, but in this series that we're going to talk on holiness. And it's going to be in the context of relationships. Yeah. And I think we all know Debi. Mother of four, wife of one, been with us on staff since 2001. Yes. And some of you might not be aware, but Debi earlier on used to lead our counseling schools. And I was just thinking about Debi, just sitting here. I think she's actually incredibly gifted relationally. She's incredibly alert relationally. I think she reads situations really, really well. She's an incredible discipler, and I think she's highly committed. Just in the years that I've worked with her and conversations that I've had with her, highly committed to relationships and right relationship. And so I think she's got a lot of authority to share with us. I'm looking forward to hear from you, Debi. I'm going to pray for you and hand it over to you. Lord, thank you so much for Debi, and thank you so much for the word that you've laid on her heart. And I just pray, Lord, as she shares with us, that your message would come across and that you would really anoint this time. Lord, we want to continuously be challenged, encouraged, sharpened in the area of holiness and in the area of relationships. So, Lord Jesus, we commit this time to you in Jesus' name.
Amen. Oh, it's so exciting. I get to be on this side. Normally I see the backs of heads but yeah, this is a very close topic to my heart in a lot of variety of ways. I don't think I've ever really talked it in this kind of a message before. But yeah, relationships is my heartbeat. I love it. I love people. I love to understand people. That's kind of a life message. Above all else, seek understanding. And to understand the people that are in front of you, not out of your own filter, but out of their filter. And to really grow in that, because you grow in the richness of God, because God's character lies within each of us. And I really enjoyed Ryan's message last week, and just how he was talking about progressing in life is to love God. Right? It's so vital that we love God. That's why we're all here, right? We love God. We love what he's doing. We want to move in what God is doing. And we are created for divine love. We're created for that. Unconditional, dependable, internal, changeless love, right? That is what we need to do. And we need to do that to God. And we need to reflect that. And the thing is, as well, through that we get such great security, right? That's one of our things, is all our needs are secure and they're satisfied in him. You know, Ryan talked about that, the whole aspect of restlessness we find rest in him. We need to find that. We need to rest in him. And you know, that's so much a part of what we do. That's what we teach on DTS, to find God, to make him known. And so I guess really essentially what I'm bringing to you guys today is that second half of that commandment. In John 13, 34, 35, God says, I have a new commandment for you. I have a new commandment to give to you, and that is to love one another. And just as I have loved you, you also love one another. And so really, holiness in relationship is fleshing that out. And, but whenever we seek needs in others, whenever we love people, right? Whenever we are in a place of being loved by people, they're not perfect, right? And we get hurt, we have guards, and what it does is it tightens that area of holiness that we're trying to obtain in our life. But it also starts to reflect to us those areas that do need refining And that holiness needs to bring forth further and further, right? But the thing that I love when I think about holiness, you know, R.A. talked a lot about different things. One of the things that he was bringing up is just, you know, having courage, not, you know, just being at rest. I think you were talking about that as well. But there was one thing that you said at the beginning was there's just so much freedom, right? But when we find our time with God, we have that freedom, right? But it's when we encounter those moments with other people that jar us, that cause that restlessness, we don't have that freedom. That freedom feels restrained, you know. But the thing that I think about with Jesus, when I think about God, is that he is perfect, right? We talk about that in holiness. He is perfect. And when I think of that, I think, you know, one of the iconic things is that he is without sin, right? And if he is without sin, he can't sin against us. People sin against us, right? That's where that thing comes, but he doesn't sin against us. And what that brings me to think about is the fact that if he cannot sin against me, he is the most trustworthy being on this planet in existence. And if he is trustworthy, right, he is beautiful and he's captivating. I want to be with him. I want to be learning from him. Thank you, Ari. And I want to be around him. And when we are captivated by this beauty, we want to be around it, and therefore that beauty will come through us, and it will penetrate the relationships that we are around us. If we are displaying holiness by his beauty, and we're affectionate, and we are captivated by him, then, you know, when you think of beauty, it's desirable and it's accepting, isn't it? It's something that you want to hold and behold. And so I want to live my life in a way that people want to be around me. And I think that's kind of a platform that I want to really, hopefully we'll get today. But just that, you know, if there's areas where you're jarred with, all this area of I'm trying, but the holiness is just not really being displayed to other people, then be captivated by Jesus. Don't lose that awness of his beauty. Now, we can lose that sight, that beauty within each other, I think, as well. And I think the thing is that we are what? We are created in the image of God. And so in each person, saved or not saved, that image is there. And, you know, and I think we need to not lose sight, that we need to look and we need to search and we need to stay long enough so that we can see Jesus in someone. Even in the midst of the ugliness, even in the midst of the conflict, even in the midst of, I just don't get along with this person. We need to scale it back and we need to find that image and we need to stay long enough until it becomes more of what you see than what is hurtful, what is off, what is hard, what is challenging. So I want us to watch a video. I want to really focus on a story in the Bible. And for kids that are in the room that might be sensitive to a bit of, not violence, but it's like more a bit rough, just you can try to distract them. Because this story is when the woman was caught in adultery. Now, some of you are probably like, what? That's kind of like, where are you going with this? But I just want us to watch the visual instead of me reading it, to watch the visual and just think about the fact that we are talking about relationships And I want you to look at the different, we all know this story, right? There's Pharisees, there's Jesus, and there's the women. There are more people there. I think sometimes we fail to realize that it was at the temple. There was lots of people as well. And I really want to look at this story and unpack it with drawing some things to our attention, because it really does display the beautiness of holiness when it comes to how we relate. And think about the characters, think about, just watch, this is probably one of the best videos I feel like that's going to go with what I'm doing, but I think it's just, there's lots of different, Chosen probably has it, there's lots of different videos that you can watch to see that visual of this story. But so if there's the Pharisees are a bit rough with the woman, it's all decent, it's okay. But just there might be a bit of a roughness. So if your children are sensitive to that, just maybe try to, look away. So let's look at this.
Then everyone went home, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early the next morning, he went back to the temple. All the people gathered round him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman who had been caught committing adultery, and they made her stand before them all.
Teacher! This woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. In our law, Moses commanded that such a woman must be stoned to death. Now, what do you say?
They said this to trap Jesus so that they could accuse him. But he bent over and wrote on the ground with his finger. As they stood there asking him questions, he straightened up.
Whichever one of you has committed no sin may throw the first stone at her.
Then he bent over again and wrote on the ground. When they heard this, they all left, one by one, the older ones first. Jesus was left alone with the woman still standing there. He straightened up.
Where are they? Is there no one left to condemn you?
No one, sir.
Well then, I do not condemn you either. Go. But do not sin again.
I mean, it was said when we were looking at scripture, looking at this as a grace aspect, but it's incredibly merciful, isn't it, of Jesus? You know, the thing that I really want to look at is the fact that holiness is worked out in relationship. You know, when we are saved, we are sanctified, we are holy. God has brought us into that arena, right? And there's things in our life that, have to come to that, right? There's things that we do need to work out of our life. I think of this story of my life, and I could apply it to a few different points that I'm going to bring, but I'm just going to talk about it right now. But just one area in my life when I first got saved. So I got saved. I was in a youth group. I grew up in church, but I really didn't choose to follow Jesus. Like, it was kind of this thing. And I tried just to kind of live my own life. And I went to this youth group. I went to this church. And the thing that penetrated this church was love. The way they loved people was so genuine and incredible. That was the first thing that captivated me, was where is this love coming from? And I was 13. And so I started going to youth group, and I gave my life to Jesus on my bedroom floor because I knew what I needed to do. I went to church my whole life. I knew what it meant to give your life to Jesus. And I read Matthew, I read the Bible, and I knew what I needed to do, and I knew I needed to follow God. And I had such an incredible youth group, so privileged. I was able to be really discipled. I had a one-on-one. No one went to DTS. No one knew YWAM from my church. It was just very homed in on discipleship. So I had people speaking into my life. I had people telling me, when I was dating somebody, asking those real hard questions. And, I was so privileged. And I remember years later, I was talking with some friends, and we were just, I can't even remember what we were chatting about. We were just talking about, when I first came, and, how I gave my life to Jesus. And, there was obviously things I had to work on, but, I didn't have issues like this or that. And I kind of briefly said something about swearing. And then all of a sudden, the whole room went silent. And I went, what? The body language was like, and I said, what? What did I say? And they're saying, you said you never had issues with swearing. And I went, what do you mean? And they said, you had the worst mouth on you when you came to youth group. Every second word, like even when the adults are around, you didn't tame it down. You just said and I went, no, are you serious? And they're like, yes. And I went away, and I was thinking to myself, I guess I did, but maybe not as much as they saying. And I just remember thinking about that years later and going, you know what? Not one person called me up on it. Not one person. Nobody came to me, and that wasn't a discipleship point in my life. And I'm thinking, why? Why did they not do that? It was a Baptist church where certain words that weren't considered swearing was. I was so, and so I went to a couple later, and they, that were very much involved in youth and involved in the church and in discipleship stuff. And I said, do you remember? And they said, yeah, but we knew Jesus was going to work that out, and he did. And I thought, wow, I love that. I love that. I never realized that was a thing that, sometimes you just let Jesus work it out. And I think that's what we need to do in areas of relationship with one another. And that's where grace comes involved. We do this a lot. I'm not saying we don't, but I think the thing is that, we do need to understand that relational dynamics of this story, even looking at when the Pharisees brought that woman to Jesus, they didn't care about her, did they? They were more focusing on trapping Jesus. And they weren't really, but at the same time, they did, and I'll talk a bit about that later. But the thing too is that relationships expose areas of our life, our own life, that aren't right. One of my favorite definitions of relationships is expressing and experiencing the image of God in both God and others, learning more of God through living life with others. learning more about God with living life in others. Sometimes we can get caught up by all of those things, but we need to be doing those things simultaneously. We're living life with each other, and we want people to sharpen us, right? We want to be open to that. But we also want to make sure that we're more focused on seeing God and the character of God in one another and living life together, not so focused on the things that need to be worked on. Yeah? Our relationship tests. The one true test of our faith is how we live together. One true test of our faith and our journey and our walk with God is our relationships. You want to know how you're doing with your walk with the Lord? Take a good, long look, an honest look at your relationships, and really allow God to unpack that. How do you talk with one another? What are the things you're engaging in with one another? What are you encouraging in relationship? And that will help you indicate those areas that need to be worked on, but you got to go to Jesus, rest in him, and allow him to just naturally really work on those things. Yes, there's things that you have to have intention on, and God will lead you on that, right? But that's a personal aspect of relationship with God. And we need to choose to deal with those things. As God brings those up, as we interact with one another, he will choose and he will present those things that you need to work on and deal with, and you need to respond to that. But we also want to be image bearers, and we want to display who God is through our relationships. It's important to notice that. I'm getting a phone call from my daughter. No, it's fine. She probably doesn't know that Dad's picking her up. The other point I want to look at is areas when we look at the Pharisees. I want us to just think about the Pharisees in this story, okay? And this whole aspect, you know, they're known for what? Self-righteousness, yeah? They really did want to do what was right. You know, I think the Bible really portrays Pharisees as that they're very self-righteous. But, you know, they are very much known for really intentionally wanting to do what was right. But they got so caught up that that holiness was a behavior, right? That was the thing they got caught up in. And so this whole thing, even with Jesus, is that he was merciful. He was showing compassion to people that they didn't believe deserved it because that was sin. And they lost sight of relationship. They lost sight that relationship is the key. They started to patrol behavior. They started to patrol behavior and insist on people behaving in a certain way. And so they went after, so I think a lot of the time with this woman caught in adultery, it probably was not the first time. Because how else would they have known about her? How would they have found her? You know, and so sometimes, you know, my imagination goes that they thought, okay, what's the worst thing that God could go up against? The law that says you must put a woman to death if they commit adultery. This is a great act. Let's find someone. Oh, this lady. You know, I can't say that's exactly what happened, but they were so more concerned about trapping Jesus so that they could accuse him. And I think sometimes we can be like that in relationships. We can be so caught up in the areas that are so defeating in someone's life, that are so tripping them up, and that they just need to stop it, that we lose sight that what they need more is a deeper revelation of Jesus, and they need a deeper relationship with him. Yeah? We do not want to make sin bigger than Jesus in someone's life. Jesus should always be the bigger thing in someone's life. And we want to draw that out, encourage that out in one another. The other thing I was thinking about is the woman. Okay, what incredible! I just think Jesus, he is so kind to women in the Bible, isn't he? And we don't really know her side of the story. And but the way I see this story is for her in that moment. She moved from this, I'm going to turn this over. Okay. She moved from self-focused to seeing the beauty of Jesus, to seeing his holiness in action in that moment. The woman met Jesus in his holiness. She saw something, that shouldn't have happened in that time. She was in deep shame. Okay, she was brought out in public with everyone. They put her before Jesus. They put her in a public pedestal, and she was probably overwhelmed with her failure. Shame, fear. She couldn't think of anything else. She was fearful. Her life was flashing before her eyes. She knew, and she probably has seen this happen before, right? So she knew that her life was done. But then there was the man Jesus standing before her. And sometimes we can get overwhelmed with our own sin and our own failure that we try to stop. And we can get so overwhelmed and just so focused that we forget to be captivated by him and realize that by his beauty and his way he deals with us is the thing that changes us. We have no indication fully if the woman did what she did from there, do we? But you would assume that changed her life. You would assume that changed her life. And the thing that I often think about in this story is, what motivation did Jesus give to that woman to sin no more? What motivated her other than that she just didn't die? Okay, that's plainly obvious. She didn't die, so that's a motivation enough. But just think about that for a minute. What was it that was the very thing that he did? The thing that I think about is that he gave her dignity. He gave her humility when she was in the most undignified moment of her life. She's standing before him. The other thing, when I think of the humility, I think of Jesus' humility. And when you look at this story, there's two times Jesus did something that was unheard of. He crouched down and he wrote in the sand. He did that twice. And I think when Jesus does things, and when in stories, when things are done repetitive, right? They want our attention. And often we draw to, Jesus did this or that, and we're so intrigued about what he wrote in the sand that we forget of the actual physical him crouching down. And the thing that he did was he made a statement. He crouched down before a woman who was just committed adultery. He physically went down. That was unheard of for a man to do that to a woman, let alone a woman caught in adultery. He didn't say anything. What was the only thing he said? It was, if you have sin, if you are without sin, you cast the first stone. And when he did that, he crouched down afterwards. And I think what that signifies is humility. And I think that is one of our biggest things, that sometimes in situations we just need to put ourselves. We just need to kneel before that person and say, you know what, with all that's within me, I just need to hear you out. But you know, the thing with this is that, you know, that display of humility also spoke a big thing to me when I was looking at this, is that they wanted to kill her, they were projecting her sin and that she should surely die. But Jesus crouched down, humbled himself, and he says, you know, like the thing that I feel like God says in that moment to me is that death will happen, but it won't be by the sin of this woman, and it won't be by the stone that you throw, but it's by me. And I think we always have to keep putting ourselves back to that, you know, when there's trying times, when we're relating to one another, you know, Jesus died on the cross, and he is the one that will help us work these out. And we cannot just be so fixated on how do we get this job done? How do we display holiness? How do we do? No, what we need to do is do what Jesus did in this story. We can be more charged by fear than the stunning of Jesus. That's another thing about this woman, is that she's turned and she saw this dignity that he unleashed upon her, and it captivated her. I think that's what motivated her to sin no more. She was captivated by God's perfect holiness in this story. Jesus gave her mercy as well, hey. And you know, the thing that I think of in this moment as well is that we do need to understand the mercy. She took a hold of that, the mercy of God. And you know, we need to be in places where we receive God's mercy in situations, relationally, for ourselves, but for others. But if we can't receive God's mercy in our problems, where we're in our worst, then we can't reflect that to others. So we need to find those moments. We need to pull away, and we do not want to be in danger of self-righteousness in relationship. And how he was with this woman can really challenge us and help us. Now, looking at Jesus and how he modeled, I mean, I've talked a little bit about it, but how he modeled holiness. You know, one thing I think about, this was a really difficult situation, if we really think about it. Jesus is just doing a good teaching with people that love and listen to him. And then all of a sudden, with commotion, the Pharisees, with such rage, bring this woman with such force and challenge him. And it's not just the Pharisees and Jesus. He's got the people he was just teaching. He's got the people that are walking by. It is a very intense scene, if you think about it. And Jesus, you know, he did it with such wisdom in that moment. With one sentence, he had the whole thing diffused. You know, so many times we need that ability to diffuse situations, and holiness will bring that by just one sentence. You know, he didn't have a big speech. They were throwing questions at him. They were trying to back him in a corner, and he diffused and dispensed the situation as fast as possible that it could have been done. That's displayed holiness and tremendous mercy on this woman. It gave a chance for the Pharisees to have humility as well. You know, there's not a lot of response by them, hey. But the humility at which he did was incredible. This display, they saw him kneel down. They saw all of this, but they had nothing to say other than either throw the rock away or walk away. That's all their response was, and they took humility. They didn't flare up. And so I often wonder, in those times, they must have been deeply affected in that moment, those Pharisees. Not all Pharisees in the Bible were against Jesus, right? Look at Nicodemus. There wasn't a lot of that, but I just wonder, there's got to be at least one of those Pharisees that walked away thinking second thoughts about what they were about to do just then, and actually seeing Jesus for who he really was. So then, the humility that was there, that gave the woman mercy and the chance to leave the situation quickly as well. He didn't have a lecture with her. He didn't say much, did he? He just asked, "Where's your accuser?" "They're not here, sir." "Then go. I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more." And so sometimes in that we want to quickly diffuse situations, but we want to really give people opportunity to go change without having to bring a lot of extra in their life. Holiness is displayed in wisdom and love in this story. And Jesus related. And the way he related in this story was beautiful, and it was effective, and there was change. And these are the things that I look at. It's just seeing, and I guess the questions I bring, just to even wrap it up for now. Seeing the time, but just, can we be like the Pharisees sometimes in this story? Displaying a little bit of self-righteousness in how we relate with one another. Whether it be, I do these things better, or this is how I live my life. When you get conviction on something, do you broadcast it? Do you make a point to communicate it with one another? Because we can be awkward sometimes with that. Can we be like the woman, so overwhelmed by our sin that we lose the power and the beauty of Jesus in his work in our life, and spend more time asking Jesus to get this sin out of my life or help me stop doing this than just sitting and actually letting him do that and allowing his captivity to move us? And eventually we just stop. And yes, I know there's things that are deep in our life that we really do need intentional work on. And I don't want to excuse that. But, sometimes we can have moments like the woman, so overwhelmed in her sin that she loses focus. But yet she refocused, didn't she? And she saw Jesus for who he was. And what would it look like to be like Jesus in this situation, in relationship with others, and to really see that, think about that. So yeah, that is all I have to say today. But I just thought I'd throw those questions out there. But yeah.